Hello, everyone, and welcome to Connections Resource Center. And I am Nat. I am Connections Community and Outreach Coordinator. And this week is all about seniors and senior caregivers and recognizing the many contributions that older adults have made in our community. And with us today, we are thrilled to welcome Danielle Lanyi, who is Connections Executive Director. Welcome, Danielle. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Nat. Nice to be here.
And we are also welcoming Jean-Yves Lord, who comes from L'Appui, and he is the Executive Director of L'Appui pour les proches aidants de l'Outaouais.
Good morning, Nat. Hello, Danielle.
Hello.
Now, a little bit about Jean-Yves before I kind of go off and let Danielle and Jean-Yves talk. And Jean-Yves has actually been with Appui since 2012 when he decided to limit his coaching practice to local entrepreneurs and started getting involved in the local nonprofit community in various roles until he was offered to be the founding executive director of L'Appui Outaouais. So thank you so much for joining us, Jean-Yves, and for talking to us about all of the resources and supports that you have for senior caregivers in the Outaouais. So this is awesome. All right, so I will let you two chat, and I will see everyone later on.
Thanks, Nat.
Thank you, Nathalie.
Well, thank you so much, Jean-Yves, for being here this morning. Much appreciated. You and I go a ways back, right to that founding moment where you were the executive director and I was on the board of directors. And so we've worked and collaborated now for many years, and it's been a lot of fun and a great journey to be on.
Yes, indeed, it has. Yeah, we started back at a time when it was not very common to hear about caregivers.
Absolutely.
People simply looked at you kind of funny, referred to a proche aidant or a caregiver. And yes, and now, well, there's about to be actually a law recognizing caregivers. And this is going to be happening over the next several months. But that's quite a big change.
Yes, a much needed change.
Yes, indeed.
I think we've maybe paved the way to bring that awareness more to the forefront over a number of years.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the mission of the Appui. There's the Appui National, the Appui, the regional Appuis, and kind of how it works, so people get an understanding about what the structure is like and the services.
Mm-hmm. Well, Appui pour les proches aidants, so Appui for the caregivers, and for those of you who may not understand what the word Appui means,
right.
It actually means support. So support for the caregivers of seniors. And it was started off as an organization back in 2009 in Outaouais. We actually were founded in 2012. So there are 17 regional organizations that sort of work together as a network. And there's the national organization. The national organization actually is the holder, if you wish, of the funds that come from the government and from the Chagnon family foundation that actually has provided money for a 10-year period. And this money actually supports our operations, which is a very small part of what we do. And it supports a few direct services and business or operational types of activities that we do. And as well, the biggest part of what we do, 80% of the funds that we have, go directly to organizations like Centre de Ressources Connexions, and we fund projects or activities and services for caregivers. So the types of projects that we fund would be ones that provide information, training, different kinds of training workshops and things like that for caregivers of seniors. Definitely psychological support, group or individual, and respite.
So that's a pretty important mandate, and I think as a funded organization, we've certainly appreciated the opportunity to work with caregivers. I think one of our biggest challenges is, as you mentioned before, creating that awareness about, exactly who is a caregiver and what does a caregiver do, because as an organization, one of our biggest challenges has been in trying to get that message across, because often people do it out of a sense of duty. This is just what you do, is you look after your loved one, but without recognizing the full role and the full impact, and also some of the consequences that can arise, because we know caregiver burnout is really key. And so in trying to get people to recognize that they are a caregiver and that there are services, and even if they don't need them,
Yes.
that services are still there, and it's often better to ask earlier than later, so to avoid a crisis. So that's a lot of what we've been trying to do, is creating that awareness.
Yes, indeed. It's so very, very important to recognize that at some point, all of us are going to be caregivers, or we will have a caregiver in our lives. So, and that's been a huge, I'd say, one of the biggest challenges is to help people understand that they are a caregiver. Everything might be going well, cool, I'll relate a story to just give you a sense of what happens to a caregiver in sort of in the flow of life. We were at the Salon de la Femme, which is there are about 10 or 12,000 people that went by our kiosk there over the couple of days. And a woman is coming down the hall. She's about 55, maybe 60, and she's walking arm in arm with what I presumed was her mother. And her, as they were coming by, one of my colleagues actually came up and said, "Oh, bonjour, madame, how are you? Are you a caregiver?" And I was, no. So no, I just, I do, my mom is still with me. She's 91 years old. She's in great shape. She's still very autonomous. I said, I stepped in and I said, oh, that is really great. So do you, ever go out together shopping, to the restaurant? Oh, yes. I mean, every week, of course, we have a date and we go do a little shopping and then the pharmacy, and we have dinner twice a week. Oh. In my mind, I'm saying we're not asking the right question, because this person doesn't have a clue that she's a caregiver.
That's
she's
right.
accompanying her mom every week, taking care of her. Taking care doesn't necessarily mean that, she's, giving her medicine or, taking her in and out of bed, but she was definitely taking care of her mom. And she was doing very well. But if she, at that point, had decided, yes, I'm a caregiver, she was setting herself up for better support for herself as the journey evolves, because of course, as you get older, things don't get better. Your senior, whoever, a friend, family, mom, dad, is not going to get better with time. Chances are they'll need more and more help. So that's why the organization is there, is to help provide services in the community to support the caregiver, because most seniors really would love to stay at home until the very end. And if there's no caregiver around, that won't be able to happen.
That's right. And if caregivers don't look after themselves, and they end up in burnout or they end up with health issues themselves, then who's going to look after their loved one? And I think that's something that needs to be planned for throughout the course of it. So, and the best time to plan is when things are going well, not when you're in the middle of a crisis. Because we know as we get up in age that things can change radically overnight. You know, and the situation can evolve. I mean, because the journey of a caregiver can be, you know, very gradual. It can start very slowly and intensify over time, or sometimes it might even stop for a while. And the same as, you know, if there's a situation that arises, somebody has a stroke, all of a sudden they're incapacitated, and, you know, everybody's world is kind of, you know, topsy-turvy. And then how do you adjust to that? So it can be very sudden and it can be, you know, very intense. So there's a lot of different different aspects when it comes to being a caregiver. And I think it's trying to you know, bring people to understand that even in, you know, its mildest, most innocuous forms, that it is caregiving and have that awareness.
That's right. That's right. And just being aware of the services is so important. Being aware that there are some so that you can look for them, but also being aware of where you can call or where you can reach out, you know, for that next step if something were to happen, you know, more suddenly. So, you know, one of the things we really encourage caregivers is to actually go online and register to receive our caregiver newsletter every month. In fact, since the pandemic started, we've been actually publishing every 2 weeks. And you know, it's simply online. You can just, you know, register there. You can have a paper copy, or preferably if you can receive it by email, so much the better. That will give you information that will keep you sort of on top of what's going on in your community and things to sort of watch out for. So good.
An excellent resource.
That's right. And it'll give you places to call or to check online. For example, we have you know, an excellent directory of all the services that are available for seniors and caregivers in Outaouais. Of course, that has, you know, to be kept up to date, and which is something that we do. And we also have the helpline. The caregiver helpline is extremely useful because we have experts who are there who can guide you, you know, towards the services that you may not even know that you need. And so those are things you'd find out if you're aware that, yes, your caregiver may not need a lot of support right now, but there's some out there, and here's where I can get it.
That's right. And it's just good to know ahead of time where those resources are at. And it's not like you need to know 10 phone numbers, you know. Info Social 811 option 2 is one. The line for the caregivers is excellent, can direct you to a number of services. And they are specialized people who have been trained to do that kind of work and to work with senior caregivers. And we do have links with those who are answering that line. So even though you're calling a 1-888 or whatever kind of number, the person who's going to be answering has some knowledge about our region specifically and has a link with you and with all of us as well, should the need arise. So there's good coordination.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. We have one of our, you know, one of my colleagues, you know, basically, as a matter of fact, this week is doing a phone call round again amongst the different organizations in the area, making sure that our information is always up to date with regards to services that are still available during the pandemic or not, and what's going to be going on during the summer and what may be happening in the fall as well. So that's happening as we.
Harder for me to update my info.
That's great. You'll get the phone call, Danielle. So
So knowing the resources is really important. And I think one of our challenges as a minority community as well is getting the information out on those resources.
That's
right. So we already have the challenges for caregivers, but when you look at the situation in a minority, it becomes even more challenging at times. And sometimes there's an apprehension that if you call somewhere that the service might not be available in English, or maybe the person won't be able to answer you. But I know that the helpline for caregivers is bilingual, and there's always a thing about just asking for it, and somebody will find it, because I think all of our organizations here in the region are making an effort to provide their services in both languages to the extent possible, so it's really important.
Indeed. And we're quite fortunate in the Outaouais area to have a lot of people, they may not be perfect in English, but they can speak English, or they'll be able to understand and to direct you. The important thing is not to be able to speak perfectly either language, but to be able to understand each other.
Exactly. So there's a lot that can be done.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So I guess this new law, do you have any more information around it, or what that's going to look like, how that could change things?
Well, I think the key factor here is in this law, and I'm not, I don't have any privileged information, but my view of it, because I did go through it, is that the key thing is that we are officially recognizing the caregiver as a person who is important and a partner in supporting seniors as they age, as they proceed through the aging process, and to include the caregiver in, how would I say it, in the care package, if you want to put it that way. Right. If you have, I'll use an example. If your mom is 88 years old, she needs to see the doctor. The law will now make it such that you, as a caregiver, not only can go along, but will need to go along. They will not force you, of course. Mm-hmm. You will be welcome to be there with your mom when you meet the doctor. And the doctor will include you as a caregiver and the patient, your dad or your mom. Yeah. They will include them both as people who are in need of support, or whether it's medical or other. So you will both be, quote unquote, treated there, welcome together. Whereas now the system is made in such a way that the senior is the patient, and that's it. And even if you're dragging along and you're having a hard time and you're suffering from anxiety because you're having a hard time sleeping at night because your parent is getting up at every hour, you were until now sort of another person. If you had your own doctor and that type of thing, that would be fine, but that won't happen anymore. You'll be treated together as a team. Yeah. So that's the biggest key, so that you're into it. And then the other thing, of course, by recognizing that, of course, financing on a longer term basis for support for caregivers will be along. Another major aspect is that we're no longer talking about caregivers of seniors anymore. We're talking about all caregivers, because there are about 73% of caregivers are caregivers of seniors. But the other, caregivers also need similar type of support, similar type of help and recognition. And that's going to be recognized with the new law. So that is, I think, a major step forward. In fact, L'Appui is now servicing with its information hotline or caregiver helpline. It's now servicing all caregivers, not just caregivers of seniors. Yeah, that's part of the transition as well.
And that's a really interesting aspect, and I think it's something we discussed early on back when we were founded, and that it was just for caregivers, knowing that caregivers is much broader.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really pleased to see that that's been expanded, because we also have our youth who are caregivers for their parents as well. That has been sorely overlooked, and where we really need to shed some light on that too. Our youth who are struggling to go to school, to look after a parent who has a chronic or a degenerative disease, and we don't recognize that as well. So there's that whole awareness overall of, caregivers, which is so key.
Many different types of caregivers, seniors who have adult children that depend on them, and so it's a huge challenge for them. And sometimes you have handicapped children, children with autism, at different varying levels, and demand a lot of attention. Well, those are all parents that are not just parents, they're caregivers.
Absolutely.
They don't have the same types of freedom to move around, do what they want, as most of us do.
Yeah. Well, I hope today that anybody listening who may have been a caregiver recognizes themselves. Somebody who is a caregiver does recognize themselves, and to look for, just look to see where the resources are. And I know that Brenda McGuire, who's been one of our volunteers, has, made a lot of comments about being a caregiver herself. And, it's a lot on every level, physically, mentally, emotionally. So it's really looking after, all of those needs as well.
Yes, indeed. And, maybe a message to Brenda and to many of you might be listening. It's still time to have some input into this law. There will be some consultation, some more consultations. There's been, several major steps already leading to the first, how do you call it? The law?
Yeah.
So, and now we have the draft in place, and there will be other consultations, and you can still, keep your eyes out. You can still participate in that and provide some feedback, and good if we do.
And I think this pandemic has also helped to shed light on caregivers, because we've heard a lot from caregivers who were cut off from their loved ones, and everything that they've gone throughout this. I think that COVID has really kind of shown the light there, and amplified what people are living on a regular basis. So that's a bit of a silver lining, but now it's like, how do we respond to it?
Yeah, indeed. There's been a extremely difficult times for caregivers in Quebec. Unfortunately, our system was, by a series of circumstances that, coincided to happen this way. Most of the victims have come from caregiver, care places. I mean, mostly in the public system. So that is really difficult, and the caregivers could not have access, and that in the future will also be a little different. It will be systems are going to be provided, so that if something like that happens again, we'll know how to deal with it. So I think that's definitely one good thing that's happened with this COVID.
And I think the other thing is, because it shed light on not just the public system, but also private residences as well, that may make some people reluctant who may have normally gone towards that type of a living environment, but today's saying, I don't want to go there. And so where we, very well could see an increase in caregivers because seniors wanting to stay home longer. So I think we need to focus, the system needs to focus on that as well.
And maybe one of the things we should mention here, Danielle, is, the law is there to recognize the caregiver, but it also recognizes as a caregiver that you have your responsibility and your right to do as much as you want or as little as you want. That is not something that's going to change. That is our freedom to choose. It's not everyone, can feel up to
that's right
caregiver, for their parents. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons for that. And that too is important, not to imagine that we're going to be forced to take care of our parents,
exactly.
Not the case.
That we do it based on what our situation, our own individual situation, and our, like you say, our freedom to choose how much and how little that we want or can do.
Okay.
Well, all of these resources, Nat will be posting in the chat afterwards, so they'll be accessible, as well as this this session will be on our site, so people can watch it afterwards whenever they want. And so I'd like to thank Jean-Yves for having joined us this morning, and we look forward to more sessions. So have a great day. Bye.